So you ready to get started?
Um, you know what? Actually, yeah, because I feel like both other times I started with the response no, but we're going anyways. This time we've had a couple episodes under our belts, and I feel like beginning to know the process, and I still have the nerves. I've had nerves all day about this, but I think that who was it? I think it was Olympian track runners who stated this. I think it was a couple in an interview. I forget exactly who it was, but when when a broadcaster asked them, "Are you nervous?" They had mentioned that being nervous and being excited are the same feeling, and they choose to call it excitement over nerves. So I'm gonna stay as close to true to that mentality as possible. And yes, I'm so ready.
All right. All right. So we're off to a lot better start than the last two episodes. The last two, we always had to do a little bit of tech support at the beginning. Something was always going wrong. But
Guilty. It's me.
this
I am wrong.
this
Go
time,
on.
this time we can go ahead and start our journey, which will be the topic of this podcast.
Yeah. Yes. And as you see, I'm a little more prepared in our outline this time.
All right.
Um,
So this one is going to get a little technical.
yep.
So in this episode, we're really going to get kick-started with the overall goal of this podcast, which is helping everyone watching achieve whatever goal that they want to set for themselves and actually follow through with the process of actually fulfilling it while having as great of experience doing that as possible. So before you want to get started on your journey, and figuring out what specific goal you want to set for yourself, the big important question to ask yourself is really, what do you want? And to ask what you want, you really need to know yourself. And it sounds very cliche and maybe a little confusing and maybe a little contrived, but a lot of people don't really know themselves. There's even the whole saying of, oh, this person knows me better than I know myself, which is probably true. Other people, especially the people that say live with you, like your parents or siblings or
I
whatnot.
want to clarify that because it's a very obvious reason that a lot of people overlook. The reason other people are able to know you better than you know yourself is it's that your eyes look outward, not inward. And humans are very much a sense based species. So we react and live through our senses. So what we know is what we see. So that's why I know my brother than he knows himself, and he knows me more than I know myself. We grow up looking at each other, not at ourselves.
Right. These people that live with you, they had to specifically deal with you rather than you specifically dealing with yourself. Actually, more accurately, a lot of people would rather avoid having to deal with themselves. And so that can probably be another podcast topic on its own of really how to kind of just be with yourself without necessarily relying on entertainment, your phone, your computer, internet, and just learning to be at peace with yourself and kind of being able to just be and do whatever you need to do without just getting lost in boredom or going insane from not having something to take your attention at all times. So there's many ways of getting to know yourself. Um, One of the most famous two that are a little bit split in between whether you're more in the science field versus not is, well, I guess technically there's three, but we're going to avoid the third one. One is the Myers Briggs, is known by its four-digit acronyms, and it is a four-digit acronym itself, known as the MBTI, or the Myers Briggs Type Indicator. And there's also the Big Five model, which this one is more generally accepted among psychologists, scientists, and whatnot, and spread among the scientific community. So, and then the third one that we're not going to be really talking about is horoscopes. And we'll get into more of why I'm avoiding that one specifically as we start talking about the first one that we're going to cover, which is the Myers Briggs Type Indicator.
I was just about to say that we should at least cover why they're a bad idea. Even though they're fun entertainment, that's what they are, entertainment. Um,
Right.
Please proceed.
Okay, so starting with the Myers Briggs. So, a little background, the Myers Briggs were created back during the World War II era by Myers and Briggs. They were a mother and daughter, and they developed this system based off of the work of Carl Jung, specifically for women entering the workforce. Since that time period, a lot of jobs have been using the Myers Briggs type indicator in order to kind of ascertain the personality types of each individual applying for the specific job for the purposes of seeing how well that person would mesh into the team that they would go into, how well they'll mesh for that job they're going into, and also kind of keeping track on how specifically to interact with that person in general. Now, most companies won't specifically tell you that that's what they're giving you. But if you ever apply for a job where you had to take this test, where generally the format is you're asked these general questions on, okay, here's a scenario, what would you do, or how you feel about the scenario, and give a response between like one, not very likely, through five, very likely, with neat three being neutral or you don't know or it doesn't matter to you or whatnot. So those tests that would be given out to you are based on the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and that's specifically what they are for.
I believe that
So,
at the end of the test, you add up all the numbers. Is that one? You add up all the numbers, and based on the end result is your type or whatever.
well, I mean, you don't specifically add up numbers yourself. So the the test is done. It's typically an electronic test. It's done electronically. There's an algorithm behind the test where categorizes um, it categorizes between four major functions depending on what question was asked and what number between 1 and 5 did you answer to that specific question. So the four different categories would be how you interact with other people, specifically extroversion and introversion. The next would be um, how specifically you perceive the world. So that would be between intuition and sensing. Next would be how um, beyond just perceiving the world, how would you specifically interact with the world? So that would be between thinking and feeling.
I was just
And
about to
then,
say, is thinking and feeling the difference between intuition and sensing?
no.
So,
Um,
can you
so
elaborate for myself and any audience members who might not?
Yeah, so intuition and sensing by the Myers Briggs Type Indicator is specifically for how you perceive the world itself. So the difference between intuition and sensing is for sensors, they mainly rely on their five senses. They are usually a little bit more athletic, they're usually more grounded, they focus more on what's happening in the here and now as well as the past, and they're more literal, straightforward, concrete, and like a lot of details. Versus, and sensors also make up the majority of the world's human population. Intuition is very different from sensing. Intuition is less with the five senses and more mental. So people with intuition are typically more inside their heads. They're typically higher in creativity. They usually have vivid imaginations. They're usually pretty adept at figuring out what's going to happen based on patterns that they've seen before. They're usually future oriented. Um, they're usually big picture type of thinkers rather than focusing on specific details. And there's a pretty small population of intuitives across the human population, which is kind of a good thing because realistically you do need a lot more sensors than intuitives in order to make the world work, because a lot of making the world work is nitty gritty type of jobs where you really need to be physically present and knowing what you're doing rather than just being mostly inside of your headspace. Whereas those type of jobs would be more inclined to like science, STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, math, art, and so forth.
I was gonna say we're in two totally different fields, but I was gonna say that I feel like we're both more of an intuition type versus a sense type. Is that accurate
Right,
to say?
right.
And now I'm
And
wondering how that's possible, unless the other aspects of the Myers Briggs system kind of differentiates us.
yes.
Because, like, okay,
Um,
we're both intuitions, but we're probably different in the other four categories.
right.
Okay.
So that's like one of the four major dimensions. So again, we had the extroversion versus introversion. We had the intuition versus sensing. We have the thinking versus feeling, and then lastly, we have kind of like your specific stance, which would be judgment versus perceiving. And so
Mm,
those last two is going to determine on which of the second two. So the first being extroversion versus introversion. We're talking about intuition, sensing, thinking, and feeling. Those are going. The judgment perceiving is going to determine which one of those two categories that you primarily rely on. So if you're a perceiver, you're mainly going to rely on intuition or sensing. And if you're under judgment, you're mostly going to rely on thinking or feeling. So that would be the difference on you mainly operating on how you perceive the world versus you mainly operating on how you interact with the world.
mm.
So,
So, as an artist, I more so interact with the world versus perceive it. Like, I create and put out into the world. Or
well,
is that a product of how I perceive the world? Then I create what I create and then uh, put it out.
you would fall more under the category of perceiving. And so, which is pretty common for artists, because like the main thing in order to really let artists do their thing is that they have to be able to really visualize what they're trying to do in order to put it out there.
Mm.
So for me, that would be my weak point. I have I I have strong enough mental visualization where I can imagine something and I can like do spatial rotation of it, which allows me to work in engineering because that's like a main thing you need to be able to do.
Hmm.
But it's not so much to the point where I can just imagine it. Now I'll put some color behind it. And I'll kind of transform it a little bit, and then I'll just get this whole vivid picture of it, and I'll draw it, or like get this entire song in my head and then play it. I can kind of do that, but not nearly to the extent that an artist can.
It's hard to explain, but basically, moments before I actually put the pen to the paper, so to speak, in this
Mm,
case, the tablet pen to the tablet when I'm designing a logo for you or someone, I actually already, for the most part, seen it
mm.
and know how it's going to look at the end. However, of course, technology and media restrictions can sometimes prevent me from accomplishing what I visioned or envisioned going into it. So sometimes I have to accept what my limitations are and work around and through it to still make an acceptable product. But that's not what we're talking about.
Right. So this kind of corresponds with some of the previous times you had me on your art stream where you're making like the logo and the stream overlay. And a lot of the times you ask me questions on, okay, so how do you visualize this, or how would you like to see this done, or whatnot? And I usually just like, I don't know. Like I'm trying
Yes.
to think of the different possibilities, but it's difficult.
It's like me going, "Hey James, 12 or 18," and you answer yes.
Basically.
And
So
that's how it works for me when people ask me science things. I answer yes or no.
right. And so like I think beforehand I asked you a question on, do you think in words or images?
Oh yeah, that was that in an episode? I'm not sure. But you're
Not in one of these episodes, but it was on your Twitch stream before.
oh, okay.
Like it was,
I
I think it was probably
remember
like the
that.
first or second time I was on there.
I
Yeah.
remember you asking me that. It's kind of a profound feeling to not know how I think.
Yeah, so this is the pretty much the entire point of this episode. It's just kind of like going into this, and then you come into a realization. It's like, actually, I don't really know myself. Huh. I've been living with
However,
myself my whole life.
I I did want to actually backtrack real quick to before we
Mm,
started. So just quick rewind. And I want to address the audience, especially those who are similar to my personality type. I'm an artist, and it takes a lot of soul searching and non mechanical means for me to know who I am for myself. And a system such as this Meyers Briggs or any of the others that we cover during this episode may or may not be for you. I would recommend either trying it or trying your own means to figure yourself out. But definitely uh, try figuring out who you are, but don't just believe blindly because this is when I was reading our podcast outline, and I even wrote a note to say stuff like this that life isn't mechanical, and as accurate as these systems that we have to figure ourselves out are, they're mechanical. They're systems, they're algorithms. Humans are not systems and algorithms. So use these tools to your benefit, but still feel it out. Let your soul accept your soul, do some soul searching, and argue with yourself about it and decide, does this make sense for me and who I feel I am? So, yes, use these tools, listen to what we're saying here, but in the end, you need to accept who you are. And if you don't accept who you are, you can build yourself up to be the person you want to accept yourself to be. So I want to now fast forward back to where we were. We were talking about. I think we finished kind of defining the Meyers Briggs and kind of saying like it's important to to know yourself, right? So you had asked me.
Mm,
You had asked me, or you had reminded me that you asked me, do I think visually or with words?
right.
And since knowing you, I think I know the answer pretty well now. And partly through like doing these episodes, but also just like gradually getting closer to you and becoming your friend. You're very insightful, and I appreciate that. And I think my answer to that is it has to be a mixture of both for me personally, because when I'm in a conversation, I think with words. When I'm preparing for an art job, I think with pictures. I think
Mm,
there's a clear way to separate that, and that is how I am. Yes, for the most part I am doing art jobs, so I mostly think with pictures, but in working on this podcast with you and how these episodes go, these are not scripted. We work on it live. You guys are watching us live. Um, I'm thinking with words right now. I'm not like when I think with pictures, my eyes are closed.
no, it makes sense. It's kind of like the difference in between like extroversion and introversion. There's the two opposing scales, but for the most part, a lot of people are more closer to the center than not. And so you've probably seen this term before, called an ambivert, which is essentially kind of a way of saying like sometimes you feel extroverted, sometimes you feel introverted. A lot of people fall into that type of domain, but there's also extremes where you have some people that just they have to have constant human contact all the time, and then there's people that are so introverted that they might as well just be what's the term called in Japanese? Hikikomoris, which is the Japanese term for like shut-ins, people that would just never leave their home under any condition, except
Uh,
probably just to get food.
so as an Orthodox Christian, we actually in our history have many of these, and we just call them hermits.
Basically,
Yeah, they live in a cave on a mountainside, and they pray
yeah,
and get food.
it's kind of like it's kind of like the thing between like men and women. Like men and women are more similar than not, but there are differences, and the further that you get to the extremities, the vaster those differences like really get. Um, Same thing with the Myers Briggs. Now, for the Myers Briggs, they separated them out into 16 different four-letter categories. Um, I don't know if I should really get into those because it would take a very long time to discuss all 16 of them.
We don't have to
Now,
list them. However, I'll address you and the audience. by the way. Hello, chat. Hello, Twitchverse. How's it going? Um, Feel free to load up our chats with questions, and if it includes what these 16 personality types are, then we'll get to it when we reach the end of the one portion of this particular episode. And we'll kind of let the questions stack up, and we'll try our best to get to them. Um, for now, let's just say that there are 16 types and that they vary based on a scale, or however you want to describe that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as far as the 16 types, the best description I can give for them essentially is that, as I said before, you can't be specifically concrete on this. The 16 types, the best way I can explain it is that imagine you have a coloring book. Let's say, I don't know, for whatever, it's a Disney coloring book. So, like, let's say the first page is Mickey Mouse, but it is an outline of Mickey Mouse. You can look at it and you can tell that it's Mickey Mouse, but there's no coloration in it. All of the different colors that you decide to fill out that outline can be compared to your own personal life experiences that would make you stand out from every other person within your specific personality type, but it's still within the confines of that specific outline. So you can take 100 people of one specific personality type, and you will notice the similarities between all of them, but they all have their own specific individuality based
Okay,
on their own experiences that they had throughout life.
can I can I give you something to work with here on this particular sentence? So let's use that Mickey Mouse example, and because I just
Mhm.
want to understand this. So using that Mickey Mouse example, and I know that I fall within advocate. Is that correct? So I fall within one of the categories of advocate. How could I how
I
could I
don't know what
use
that means.
Oh, okay. Well, I used this website and I thought it was the Meyers Briggs. Maybe it's a different system. But okay, just give us one of the 16 um, categories and describe just that one with your Mickey Mouse example, or without the Mickey Mouse example, and just like describe how within one of those 16 personality types there is a variant. And remember, you're
Okay,
talking to an artist.
right. So for me person for me personally, my personality type under Myers Briggs would be INTJ. So my best description of them is that INTJs are mainly systematic thinkers. They um they mostly rely on these functional stacks, which I'll get into later. This is like the more complicated aspect of Myers-Briggs is the functional groups, but they mostly rely on something called introverted intuition. And in this case, this is essentially the perceiving function of intuition, but it's more internal rather than external. So INTJs are really, really inside their head. They're mainly future oriented. They all have the tendency of picking something that they're interested in and just going obsession level into it. Like they're all about mastery, and regardless of, they want to go into like science or maybe in sports or whatnot, they
Excuse my
typically
language, but
trend.
that's why our podcast is so kick ass, and you guys should keep watching because James is pretty mastered and kick ass. Anyways, continue.
um but yeah, so yeah, they like to have mastery over things. They like to have functional systemized ways of doing things. They're very efficiency oriented. You'll find a lot of INTJs in science and engineering where efficiency and systems are all over the place. It's like the core of science and engineering. A lot of them are also teachers, where having a systematic approach to teaching things is required, but they do have a slight bit of flexibility. Not so much as, like, say, someone that uses extroverted intuition, but enough to kind of just work their magic essentially. Um, they all have like the downside of being really bad with their senses. A lot of them are a little bit clumsy. A lot of them usually aren't really paying attention to what's going on around them, and are so busy thinking in their heads that they sometimes run into things. And some will work around that weakness and do a lot of workouts and stuff to kind of like overcome that. But then we go back into like picking one thing and just obsessing over it to the point of mastery.
So even the working out becomes obsessive mastery.
Y- yes.
Okay.
Like if they pretty much, if any one of them, if they find something that they want to do, that they are very interested in, they are going to go all the way in.
Hmm.
Like day one, you're going to see them just being absolutely novice at them, and then you disappear for a couple of months or 3 months or whatnot, and you come back, and next thing you know, they're teaching a class on it. Whereas usually other people, they'll have a passing interest in things, and they might get into a little bit and kind of get the bare minimum of it and then move on to something else. No, it's taken all the way through.
Hmm.
But beyond that, there's also a lot of differences between each individual INTJs. Like, me personally, I know like 6 right now that I'm friends with. And, me me personally, I like music. Another one likes cooking and baking. Another one likes to sing. Another one likes to like go out to nature reserves and like watch animals and like identify different birds and stuff. Just everyone's got their own little niche. You know, they're not all doing the exact same things, but they're all doing different things and interacting with them in a similar way.
Hmm.
So that's pretty much kind of what I mean by everyone within a specific personality type will have the same outline, but they'll just use a whole bunch of different colors in it, just purely based on their own life experiences. It's essentially, there's the nature versus nurture debate when realistically both are in play. You're born the way you are, but your nurture fills in the blanks as you go along.
Hmm.
And that is what the kind of the oxymoron that people aren't as varied as they think, but they all are still unique.
Except for, I don't know if you remember last episode, I explicitly told you that I'm the chosen one.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, everyone. But yeah, I totally know how you feel, and I just want to say that that's those variances are exactly what I like to call your soul, because there's there's more souls on Earth than there are human bodies. And I don't even know if I can get off trying to explain this to you guys. I don't even know if I'm right, because, I mean, who's to say what's right and what's wrong? But just how I feel is that, yeah, we kind of all have these, I guess, personality types, and there's systems to figure out these personality types. But as James said, one person likes going bird, spotting, and one person likes listening to music. You fit within a category, but you're unique within that category.
Right.
And that just shows
So,
that your soul is what's unique to you and fills in the gaps. Again, artist perspective. So,
right. Um, so pretty much a lot of people, well, I think almost everyone's introduction into Myers-Briggs, wherever they happen to see it or not, and decide to, oh, let me take the test and see what I am. Me personally, I don't think the tests are that good, and overall, I don't think they're that as helpful as people would like it to be. Now, the reasons why is that one, a lot of the questions in the test really depends. And you'll probably, if you ever taken like personality tests before, you'll come into an issue a lot of the times. Like even like one of those tests, like the Hogwarts house, like what Hogwarts house are you in? A lot of the questions you'll do something different based on the context of what's going on.
mm,
So that kind of throws a wrench into things. And so what you might do generally, you might not do in specific situations. And then there's also the fact that what you might do when you're younger, you might not do when you're older. And so that's one problem with it. The second problem with it is that the tests rely on strict honesty. And sometimes you get to questions where, you get into an issue of morality, and you're going to want to pick the more moral choice. Even
yeah,
though if that situation were to actually occur, you wouldn't do that.
I totally agree. I've had that. I've literally had it happen in my life where I answered a question like that, and then not shortly after, but after the fact, something happened, and then I acted without thinking, and then after the action I thought back and I'm like, wait, didn't I say that I wouldn't do this and that I would be this? Yeah, it's happened.
Yeah, like it's like we've all been there. Like sometimes life would put you into situations where you want to do one certain thing, but for one reason or the other, you have to do something else.
I wanted
It
to
happens.
I wanted
Or maybe you like to think that you'll do one thing, but you actually wouldn't. You just don't know because you haven't been in that situation.
okay. I wanted to touch on that thing I said that I thought I was embarrassed about, but I'm not. So I went to where I figured out that I'm advocate. I went to 16personalities.com and I did their test there. And
Oh,
that's INFJ. I don't know whether it was dash A or T, but I know that that's what I was given was INFJ.
okay. I know what you're
And
talking
they
about now.
labeled it
They
as
they have
advocate.
like, yeah, they have all these Dungeons and Dragons type of names to go along with the Myers-Briggs thing, but I don't remember which one goes to each one.
Yeah, so regardless, I felt that it was too goofy to take seriously because of that factor. Like, no one in real life is holding a sword and is a protagonist. However, someone might be an ENFJ, right? So, I don't know. To me, especially with the protagonist example that they give, to me and my understanding of real life is that we are actually all our own protagonists, no matter what personality type you are. Uh, and once you realize that, it's very profound, and then you start to realize that you're actually less significant than you believe yourself to be. But then it becomes a good thing because then you start to take smaller, more meaningful steps towards building who you want to be. Whereas before I realized that, uh, I was clearly my own protagonist. Now I'm less so my own protagonist, and I'm trying to like build my story uh in a non-protagonist, more insightful, impactful way to other people's stories. But yeah, so I just wanted to say that. So what does INFJ mean?
So INFJ, that one is introversion, intuition, feeling, and judgment. Um,
Mm.
I have one really good friend that is an INFJ, and I guess I can probably do like the generalized version of what I remember what the Myers Briggs would generally say an INFJ is versus kind of like how I've seen one played out. So by the test standards, an INFJ is usually kind of seen as one of those type of people that are really concerned about morality and specifically how people enact their values on the world. They're usually the type of people that will spend more time listening and understanding other people, but not getting it in return. They're kind of known as this sort of extroverted introvert, where they're very outgoing and they're very interactive with people because that's what they typically trend towards. Because their way of interacting with the world is extroverted feeling, but they need a lot of time to kind of recharge and recuperate because for introverts, interacting with other people, especially the more people you have to interact with at once, starts to drain you exponentially as the number of people go up, whereas for extrovert it'll be the other way around.
5 days to two.
Uh
That's my
Possibly.
no, that's my actual um response to what you described. It's 5 days to two. So Saturday, Sunday. Today is Saturday for me. I don't know if you're watching from the other side of the world. It's already Sunday, but 5 days to two because Saturday, Sunday, I'm at a farmer's market. Many of you guys might know this already. And I deal with a lot of people all weekend long, and it takes me about 5 days, my entire week long, to recover for the next weekend. So
Yeah,
all I'm saying is what you're saying makes sense to me.
right. Like it really varies. I've seen, I guess not specifically with INFJs, which is introversion in general. I've seen some people they need like a weekend to recover. I've seen some just disappear for a month. Like it
Oh, if
really
I could.
depends. Like these are like for like the one person I've seen disappear for like a month at a time. Like they're really shut in.
Mm.
Like they're even like it's really interesting. They're even like really sensitive. Like I mean like generally like a INFJ and INTJ and whatnot. They're usually people with those with extroverted sensing. So that would be relying on their physicality for like taking in the outside world. For them, for like INTJs to INFJ, they have like a similar stack with those. They have introverted intuition at the top, extroverted sensing at the bottom. They're generally kind of sensitive to like light, so like issues with sight, sound, so issues with hearing, with touch. Usually, they don't like people touching them. With taste, they have particular taste. They don't really like things too spicy or too sour. Just they don't really handle extremes with taste too well. And smell, like they usually have very sensitive. They have like very, very sensitive senses where they can't really handle extremes too well. And I've seen variants with that as well, where some can like they can go into like a loud party and it's irritating to them, but they can at least handle it for like an hour or two versus some people they just go in and they're just out immediately and it's like nope, can't deal with it. So
I have that within my friend cycle or circle, and actually, like my friends circle is mostly within the introverted section, but there's definitely that big variation where I'll actually withstand the whole party and probably be the last one there, even though I'm introverted. And it's mostly just, I think that's part of the nurture that you're describing, because I grew up with a culture, a Lebanese cultural. It takes an hour for us to leave just to say bye. So I think that's like that part. Whereas I have other friend, actually most of the friends in my friend circle are like, nope, you said party, nope. They won't even step in the door. The second they hear that there's one person that they don't know, they're already uncomfortable. Just one. They don't want to meet
yeah.
anyone new. So, me, I kind of, especially now, I actually really thoroughly am starting to enjoy meeting new people. I need to practice remembering names, but I think we all. Actually, no, I shouldn't speak for everyone because I don't know. But I think that takes practice. I am getting better at remembering names. But yeah, I've been more interested in getting more social as of late. And um, I still feel like I identify as introverted, even though I'm more interested now in being part of a larger community.
Yeah, so that's one thing I usually had to kind of like put out is that when I'm talking about extroverted introverted, I'm not so much talking about whether or not you like interacting with people, but whether how your energy levels change with interacting with people versus being alone. So if you're the type of person that you kind of recover from being alone and you lose energy from interacting with people, then you're an introvert. If you're a type of person that kind of gets solemn and depressed when you're alone, but you feel really energized and excited with other people, and especially the more people, the better, you're an extrovert. But you can't be an extrovert and hate interacting with people, and you could be an introvert and love interacting with people. I feel sorry for you if you're in either of those cases because that is a horrible irony, but it can happen.
Well, and that's just it, is just recently that is the case. But I'm fortunate in a way that a majority of my living is earned from my at home office.
Mm,
And I pushed myself to do this thing at the market for my community, and I love it, and I feel like it's becoming like another family to me. They're all great people, but it is ironic, and I'm just fortunate that I have the whole week to recuperate and focus on whatever I'm focused on during my alone time versus uh while I'm at the market on the weekend.
mm.
Actually, let's just bring this up right now. Before the podcast, I was letting James know that I'm not in a good mood and I'm sad and stuff. Um, it's kind of true. Well, it's definitely true. I'm have some things going on in my life. And on top of that, when I got home from the market, I was drained from all the people I had to be around, and also maintaining my personal charisma, so that, because it's honestly none of that public people's business to know that I'm sad or happy. I'm a Pokemon professor there to promote awareness for the Canadian Cancer Society. So it's also draining to have to put on that hat and keep my own, internal feelings to myself for that duration of time. I don't know if that kind of relates to these personality types, or the irony that you're talking about, but I I didn't feel energized. In fact, I was getting my energy drained by doing this, by like being at the market and being the Pokemon professor. But I'm passionate about it and I thoroughly enjoy it. So I'm enjoying it while my energy is being drained, kind of like how a soccer player enjoys playing soccer while he's sweating and getting exhausted by the end.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, you're introverted, you got drained from interacting with a lot of people. Makes perfect sense. But you're still in a case where you do want to interact with other people. So, um, that's essentially what I mean by the difference between introversion and extroversion. So to not be confused with whether or not you actually like interacting with people, but rather your energy intake and outtake based on you interacting with people versus being alone.
Nope, only Joe.
Okay, he can. Okay, he can hear me now. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So
I'm glad for the YouTube version we get both our audios, so we could just choose the most acceptable and move forward. Yay!
yeah.
As for you
Hopefully, we don't
live
get to a
audience.
point where it's just like no, we can hear each other, but no one else can hear us, and it's just a silent movie.
That would be that, that
I
would
don't
be
think you want to. I don't think anybody wants to take the job of making the subtitles for that.
yeah,
That sounds awful.
especially since our podcasts go for around 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, that would not be fun. That's way longer than like one of those silent movies.
Hmm.
And even then, like in those silent movies, they don't talk much.
Um,
Okay, so we kind of discussed like the basic general Myers Briggs types. So, how long ago did you even start to be muted all that time? We've been on for 44 minutes.
is that wow? Okay, and I was literally just about to ask. Mine says an hour. Um, is that acceptable? Since I think on our outline we're on I of A still.
Yeah, we kind of got it's. I imagine the first part, both the Myers Briggs and the Big Five, are going to take a little time, but like getting through the rest will be pretty fast.
Okay.
But more so setting up the groundwork of understanding what this even is in the first place and why it matters. Um, so yeah, the next thing I was bringing up of why we're avoiding horoscopes in general is that we want to, for the Myers Briggs, we want to avoid horoscoping in general. And the reason why we want to avoid doing that is that oh, actually, let me finish my previous thought before we got sidetracked. for taking the test, you do need to be absolutely honest. Most cases, that's not going to be the case for a lot of people taking it. So you will run into the issue, and you may even hear from other people that they'll take the test at different times and get completely different results because they either don't actually know what they'll do in those specific situations that have been brought up, are not completely honest with themselves about some questions, and sometimes people are in certain emotional moods, and how they decide to answer questions changes based on what mood they're in.
And sometimes there's one other possibility there. Sometimes they purposely want to fudge the results based on knowing that their employer will judge them based on the results.
Well, luckily in that case, most cases they won't even know they're taking that type of test to begin with.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware. But, like, I don't know. I feel like fear of
But
judgment is a big factor for a lot of people.
but that does happen with like one of those employer tests where it's just like, are you the like if you see a fight going on, what would you do? And they're just like, okay, what is the most appropriate answer for this rather than what will I actually do in this situation?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I can't say I'm innocent of that, but I also feel like yeah, you it's not about being honest with the people around you. It's can you be honest with yourself?
Yeah.
Cool.
And so yeah, so we want to avoid horoscoping, and the specific thing that I'm talking about is avoid taking the test, reading over the general description of whatever results you get, and then just following it to a T to the point where you start to alter your own personality to fit with the test
Oh.
rather than just using as a test to get a better guideline on the little things that you do that you're not consciously aware of and getting a better understanding of yourself. And
That
that's
is
like
a
the
big
main issue.
misunderstanding for me.
Yeah, that's like the main issue I have with horoscopes in general is that they're very vague. And so you can pretty much look at many horoscopes. You can look at many different horoscopes and you can identify with several different one of them and then just pick whatever one that's like actually fits under your birthday and just like this is me when it's actually not. But over time you start to change yourself to fit the horoscope,
That's
and that's not good.
that's how I understood it when I read the outline. I was literally thinking that you were talking about horoscopes, but now I understand that what you mean by horoscoping the Meyers Briggs system. You don't want to you don't want to fit yourself to the Meyers Briggs system. You just want to use the Meyers Briggs system as a tool to understanding yourself without changing yourself, or
Right,
to change yourself for the better based on your own desires on who you want to be.
right.
Okay?
Um, I'm going to skip the Jungian model of the psyche because I don't think we have time for that. But we'll probably have a specific podcast detailing that because that can definitely fill up an entire 2 to 3 hours by itself.
Okay.
Actually, honestly, the Myers Briggs and the Big Five can both fill up like several podcasts by themselves if we really wanted to just extrapolate on the entire thing. But for now, we're just going to stick to generalities. Um, so the thing I want to get into to close out the Myers Briggs is talking about cognitive functions and cognitive stacking. Because to me, this is the more important part rather than just whatever kind of personality description you get from taking the test and really focusing on the four-letter dichotomies that you will find after you get your results. Um, you've heard me say a few of them, like introverted intuition or extroverted sensing or extroverted feeling. Going back to the main four, where we have extroversion versus introversion, extroversion versus introversion, intuition versus sensing, thinking versus feeling, and judgment versus perceiving. If we take away the first one, so extroversion, introversion, and we take away the last one, perceiving versus judgment, we have your perceiving functions and we have like your judgment functions. So sensing and intuition have their extroverted and their introverted forms. So you'll normally hear it as like introverted sensing and extroverted sensing, and introverted intuition and extroverted intuition, as well as introverted thinking and extroverted thinking, and introverted feeling and extroverted feeling. And then on top of having all of those different mixes, you have your specific stacking of them. Now, technically, you have all 8 of them, and they're all stacked in a specific way from birth and stay the same stack all throughout life. And as you age and develop as a person, you kind of start off with like your first one. So for me, that would be introverted intuition. That's like what I mostly rely on. That's what I'm going to mostly rely on for the rest of my life. And then as I get older, then I get more access and usage of extroverted thinking, which usually around that point for INTJ, they kind of become a little bit snobbish, to keep it G. Um, and then usually around the time of like early adulthood, then kind of introverted feeling comes into play, where kind of get a little bit more mellowed out and actually start caring more about people rather than just being very Sheldon like.
I was just gonna say that as you're speaking, I'm remembering that that episode that I shared with you. I'm trying not to use names, so I'll just describe it, where scientists and comedians were on the same stage. And
Oh,
that's the thing that I noticed is even though the scientists were very polite and reasonable and absolutely that they're great people, they were perceived as, yeah, snobbish. Especially, there was one particular question where the person asked for the comedians and actors to answer his question, and then one of the scientists was like, I'm both a scientist and an actor. I'll answer. And then she answered, but I think the audience was expecting comedian A or comedian B to answer. And then the host scientist was just like, "Okay, let's move on." And then the comedian didn't even get to. I was like, I wanted to hear what one of them had to say. Instead, I got. Anyways, so that's why I'm thinking back to that episode because of what you're saying. It's like, yeah, you're kind of like, you're acting that way without knowing you are, and you're still an awesome person, even though that happened.
right.
I tend to fall in that category too, where I'll just like I'm doing right now, ranting. Okay, go on.
Yeah. So,
You
yeah,
just
and then
agree and keep talking. Okay, sorry. Go on. Go on.
yeah, so like for me specifically, you have introverted intuition, ready to go right from the start. Usually for most people, like their second function, they kind of get more access to it around the time when they're going through puberty. And then their third one, so that would be like extroverted thinking for me. Around the third one usually comes around the time of early adulthood, so that'll be introverted feeling for me. And the fourth one usually comes in much later, like around usually around the time almost when you're ready to retire, like 50, 60, when that really comes fully into play. They have like different models for that. I think the most popular one's the car model. You have like the driver, the was it the driver, the passenger, and the two kids in the back, or like the first one's the father, the second one's the mother, the third one is like the teenager, and the last one's the baby. And it's basically just detailing that your most predominant one is going to be your first stack, and your most least predominant one is going to be your last stack. And there, people do get access to them at differing ages depending on how they mature. In some cases, they just won't get access to it at all, just if they're just stunted in their personal growth. And sometimes, if they're really good along like growing as a person or getting a lot of experiences and going through rapid changes, they might get it really early. So honestly, it depends.
Can I
As far as
just
like the yeah.
interject for one moment? I just want to help our audience actually. Um,
Mhm.
so I just want to share an image on my screen, and I just want to confirm that this image is correct. So it says personality types keys. So the first quadrant shows extrovert, introvert, and then the second one, sensors versus intuitives. The third one, thinkers and feelers, and the fourth one's judgers and perceivers. Is this correct?
Yeah, so those were the four basic general
Okay.
ones that I talked about at the introduction of the
Yeah,
Myers
just so
Briggs.
we can all follow, I'm replacing the video of me, or just kind of half covering myself to show this so that we can follow along as you go through with this. Please continue.
So that one is not so that personality types keys, the ones I'm focusing on is the top right quadrant and the bottom left quadrant.
Okay.
So if for the top right and the bottom right quadrant, if you were to assign extroversion and introversion as different different cognitive functions that you could take out of those four categories, you'll have a total of eight. And those are the ones we're working with. You mainly have access to four over your life. You technically have access to all eight, but unfortunately, we don't really live long enough to really get access to the bottom four to the extent that we get access to the top four.
Mm, okay.
So, for all intents and purposes, most people focus on just four, and the last four don't really matter.
Is that why earlier you said that you don't really like this one as much as the other one, the ocean?
Um, oh, between Myers Briggs and Big Five, I like the Big Five better. What I was saying beforehand is I personally would focus more on the cognitive functions and cognitive stacking over just specifically relying on the tests themselves.
Oh, okay.
Now, understanding the cognitive functions and stacking is far more difficult, but they give you a lot more information to work with than just the tests themselves.
Okay. And more like how you want to shape your subconscious to affect the actions you take IRL or consciously.
Well, not so much taking control over it, but understanding it to the point to where when you're in specific situations where you had to make key decisions, or if you're in situations where you're trying to understand what someone else is doing, you can get to the point where you can determine what they are just by your knowledge of the cognitive functions and the stackings and know exact and kind of have a general idea of how they're going to respond to whatever situation that you're in and whatever you're going to tell them or whatnot. You can't get to that point where you can have very strong predictions on exactly what they're going to do based off their cognitive functions and the stacking of those functions. It's almost kind of scary.
I remember, I think, I don't know how long ago it was. I think it was a TED Talk, and it was a pickpocket talking about how he figured out like the right moment to strike or whatever. Like this is obviously a reformed criminal to be invited to a TED Talk. I think whatever.
Mhm.
Anyways, I think this is on that realm where yeah, it's kind of scary. It's like you understanding someone's actions before they act. That's kind of
Right.
freaky.
Yeah. But
Especially
people
knowing
do it,
that yeah, knowing that other people do know it and take advantage of it.
and you don't know that they do.
That I relate so much to this in a different category. I actually uh there's a book I'm gonna buy, but for now I'm just listening to it as an ebook. And I think I don't know exactly if this is in the book or not. I think it's prior to the reader reading the book. He kind of says like note that these are good to know whether you want to use them or not. They're good to know because then you can decide if others are trying to use it on you. The book is
Right.
called 48 Laws of Power, and it's kind
Oh
of
my god.
it sounds what's the word malevolent. Okay,
Malevolent.
it sounds malevolent, but this is that category. Be a good person, but know that evil exists and when it's being used against you.
Oh yeah, I've read the 48 Laws of Power, and my best description of it was the psychopath's paradise.
However, I don't know. As you reach the second half of the book, it seems more hopeful and more like yes, know all these laws of power, but use them like correctly and positively based on each situation. Because there is a positive and negative way to use each of those laws of power. Just
Mm,
like, I don't want to get off topic, so just like these personality keys and understanding them, there is definitely a positive and a negative way to take advantage of knowing these. And this is all new to me, everyone. Just so you all know, I don't know anything about these personality tests. And when I was reading the pre podcast outline and stuff, I was like, yep, wing it. So,
mm.
but it's really cool. And I feel like tools are not what are good or evil. I I don't want you guys to relate these words to anything like guns or whatever, because I don't even know my
I
own.
was I was just thinking about
I don't even know my own thoughts, because I'm a sensitive person, so I don't know my own thoughts about guns even being in the category of a tool. Um,
I mean technically it is.
yeah, well, Okay, anyways, sorry, I'm not here to argue with anyone.
Mm.
So I just want to say that you could kill someone with a spoon. If the spoon is made of copper, it's poison. All right? But what if you're using the spoon instead of to feed people? You're using it to like uh make a specific shape of clay model because that's an actual tool, right? So there's no matter what the tool is, and like I said, I don't know if guns are in a category of being a tool or not, and I'm not going to decide for anyone, and I'm not even going to decide for myself. But whatever any tool is, a tool is not evil or holy. It's a tool. The person using it has the choice to use it evilly or wholly.
Right. These tools that I'm presenting forth in this podcast, I am presenting it specifically for the purpose of understanding yourself. I hope that you don't try to go and learn more about it for the purposes of manipulating others. I personally can't stop you, but wouldn't I wouldn't suggest doing that. 'Cause that can lead you into a lot of trouble.
I was gonna say, based on the weight in which you use any tool for negativity, there's always repercussions. And
Hmm.
same with positively. There's repercussions for positive behavior as well. But that's not what this episode is about. So let's proceed.
All right, so I think we're pretty much good on the Myers Briggs Type Indicator. So we're going to move to the second personality model, which this one is the more generally used among the scientific community and have a lot more presence in psychology itself, which is the Big Five model.
So,
Um,
as we switch, as we proceed to the next uh, micro topic or whatever, I want to give everyone a quick second to, if you guys have comments, questions, we're gonna give you guys 2 minutes, and also I want to give you guys 2 minutes of having this key up as well. James, if you want, grab a drink of water or sit there. Up to you. If you're okay with this, just giving it a couple minutes to settle in. Is it's cool, or do you want to just power through it? It's all good with me as well.
um,
Yeah, thought
doesn't
so.
seem like we're getting. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't seem like we're getting any questions right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're getting any questions on your end.
Nope. No. So we're gonna proceed, but I am gonna leave the keys up for a few more minutes as we proceed, and then I'll take it down.
All right. So yeah, the next thing we're going to move into is the Big Five. Some people may also recognize it as the ocean model, which is probably a little bit easier to remember all of the different aspects of it. So the Big Five are separated into five major categories. Going with the acronym OCEAN, the first one is openness to experience. The second one is conscientiousness. The third one is extroversion. The fourth one is agreeableness. And the fifth one is neuroticism.
Mm.
Now, as we go into the Big Five model, you may notice some similarities to the Myers Briggs. One of the major aspects of the Big Five that a lot of people like over the Myers Briggs is that the Big Five takes into account the more negative aspects of personality, while many of the tests, general tests with the Myers Briggs, focus specifically on the positives and leave the negative out. Um, Many of the Myers Briggs community that focus specifically on cognitive functions and cognitive stacking, along with socionomics, they also focus on the negative aspects as well. But generally, for what is generally used for, a lot of the Myers Briggs tests follow under the same thing with horoscopes, where it's just straight positives and just completely feels good. So no one looks at the results and feels bad from looking at it. Um, so in this case, the Big Five is seen as the more objective personality model than the Myers Briggs Type Indicator. So going to go into each of the five categories. Realistically, you can kind of split each of the five into two for a total of 10. So, starting with openness to experience.
For quick reference, I've brought in a new image, so we've got it on my screen. Again, if you guys are watching from the website, you could watch both of us at the same time.
Okay, so for openness to experience, you have the aspect of creativity and the aspect of your openness to new experience. There's also kind of a bit of a third dimension to it, but I'm going to mostly leave it out for the purposes of this podcast because it doesn't really matter for what we're trying to accomplish here. But that third aspect is intellect. IQ is strongly correlated with openness to experience, but we're not going to focus on IQ or any of the controversy around it. For reference, IQ is probably one of the more strong aspects of psychology that has really strong definition behind it. It's been tested very thoroughly. But IQ really makes people feel a bit bad about it because you can't really increase your IQ, and IQ is a big factor in a lot of important life experiences as far as kind of what kind of university you can get into, what kind of job you can get into, and what kind of standard of
But
life you
hang
can
on.
maximally expect to get.
So, as someone who's a bit distant from this idea, and I don't even know what my own IQ is. But I've
Mm.
seen lots of apps and websites and videos and coaches that all try to sell whatever it is they're selling with the idea that whatever it is they're selling can help you improve your IQ. So you're telling me that's all a lie?
Yes.
There's no way to improve your IQ.
Now, there's ways of preventing your IQ from dropping as quickly, which generally is usually taken care of by first world countries, which is having a proper nutrition, having enough sleep, and just generally avoiding head injuries. But as far as increasing your IQ, no. Anybody that figures out how to increase IQ is going to become a trillionaire.
Or the people who claim to be able to increase IQ are millionaires because it looks like they are. They're probably selling a lot of their app. Interesting. So, you probably said this in a way that I didn't understand. What is IQ?
So IQ is the intelligence quotient. It
Okay.
is on a. It is. It's kind of interesting because the overall scale of IQ changes over time as it's mostly fitted to the general population in order to keep the average at 100. Um, so on the scale, 100 is your average populace, and anything above 100 you're getting more and more into the more especially intelligence area, and anything less than IQ you're getting more and more into the more remedial area. Anything, I believe I remember correctly, anything under 85 would be classified as mental retardation, and anything above, it was either 140 or 160, is considered as genius.
Hmm. Okay. And now,
Now,
where
as you
can
get
I.
further,
Oh, go on. Go on. Sorry.
that's why as you get further and further away from 100, you get exponentially less people in those categories. So, and I think on average, like the lowest IQ will find at a 4-year university is usually 115. So, as far as context, like it's kind of like in the same sense, in a similar sense as like the difference between sound decibels, where the difference between 10 and 20 is a lot smaller than the difference between 70 and 80. If that makes sense.
It does. I wasn't gonna interrupt for too long. I understood intelligence, but I don't know what the word quotient means. If I said that right.
Quotient is just a mathematical term. For the purposes of this, IQ just essentially means how intelligent you are. And the
Also,
IQ tests are mainly administered through extremely long pattern recognition tests because that's basically what intelligence is your ability to recognize patterns.
so
And
quotient
so that
is
would
like
determine.
quotient means where you lie within a statistic. Is that did I interpret that right?
Not not necessarily,
Oh,
but like I said, we're just going to stay away from that.
okay.
Like I don't even want to get too far into IQ in itself.
Oh, okay. IQ is that third dimension that you didn't want to go too deep in, and we're going too deep in it. Okay.
Right.
I'm starting to catch on. Bear with me, everyone. I'm of the slower type, possibly nearing the 85. I'm just kidding.
uh,
I don't actually know that, guys.
um, but yeah, like in a nutshell, IQ is basically you're about to find an IQ test. Oh my goodness. Um, but yeah, like um, as far as IQ tests, you'll generally get like an official one from a university or from Mensa. I think Mensa is like the basically the de facto IQ society, where I think they only accept members of like 130 or 140 or higher. Um, you can try to get in if you want. I personally don't care
I just want to
about Mensa
say,
whatsoever.
if you're from Edmonton, you know the Mensa as the Men's Edmonton Soccer Association. Yeah, it's awesome. Anyways, continue.
Actually, I don't even know what Mensa stands for as far as the IQ,
I already told
or
you,
that
it's
just
a
might be.
soccer association. That's all it is. There's nothing.
No, I mean, like past the joke. Like, I don't know if that's just their name or is that an acronym. Yeah, I looked it up. It's just Mensa. Um, okay, but yeah, you can get one from a university. You're usually administered by the psychology department, or you can just get one from Mensa themselves. Either or works.
Okay.
If you want to do that. But so yeah, so just the main thing is IQ is strongly correlated with um, the openness to experience category out of the big five. But the ones we're mostly going to focus on is openness to experience and creativity. So openness to experience is essentially how likely you are to interact with the unfamiliar. And if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, for openness to experience, this one is more so a right brain sort of thing. So the difference between your right hemisphere of your brain and your left hemisphere of your brain is the right hemisphere is more correlated with um, new experiences, novelty, creativity, emotion, and so forth, while the left side of the brain is more correlated with logic, your mathematical ability, and so forth. And so openness to experience would make more sense to be on correlate with the right side of your brain because the right side of your brain is what's activated whenever you're dealing with something that's not familiar. Um, and then there's the creativity aspect, which is kind of self-explanatory, which is essentially how capable you are of coming up with new and novel things. And so you'll find like if you give a big five to a lot of artists, they'll be pretty high in openness to experience. Oddly enough, if you give the big five to a lot of research scientists, you'll find that they're low in openness to experience, which is a little bit funny because earlier in the Myers Briggs, we were grouping together a lot of the artists and scientists as intuitives. And you would think that creativity is a strong aspect in scientists, but for the most part, no. Mainly because for a lot of research, the type of person who would be highly creative is also the type of person who would usually be low in conscientiousness. And so, moving on from openness and segueing to conscientiousness, we have two different dimensions with that. We have, I'm trying to remember, it was industriousness and, and I can't remember exact one, but I do remember like where the two branches are. So it's essentially one aspect of it is how hardworking you are, and essentially where you're in a situation where you do feel a bit nervous and nerve wracked and a little bit antsy because you're not doing something productive. And then on the other aspect would be the more sensitivity to discuss the categorization type of people. And these are the type of people that everything has to be, yeah, so industriousness and orderliness. So industriousness are like the kind of hardworking type of people, and orderliness are more like the categorical and sensitive to discuss type of people, where everything has to be a certain way. Everything has to be the way that it was over time. You'll see like a lot of people, you'll see a lot of contrast with openness to experience as like usually people who are high in openness are also liberals, and people who are high in conscientiousness are more likely conservatives. And this would be the reason why. Usually, you don't have a case where you have someone who's high in both openness to experience and conscientiousness. But when you do, those people are very likely to be highly successful in their lives because they have the ability of being very intelligent and willing to try new things while having a strong work ethic, which is basically like the general keys to success is intelligence and hardworking.
And risk, or take like the capability of taking there was a way to say this, calculated risk.
Which funny you bring that up because that leads us into our third category, extroversion, where risk taking is part of that category. So this would probably be like the easiest one to talk about within the big five, considering that we already talked about it. Extroversion is basically the higher you are an extroverted, the more extroverted you are, the lower you are in extroversion, the more introverted you are. And it's the same thing. How you take in energy and how likely you are to interact with differing sizes of groups of people. Along with that is that extroverts are more likely to be risk takers. So usually extrovert extroverted people need more external stimulus rather than internal stimulus. So this is typically why you'll find like a lot of people that like to do things like skydiving or taking like the more risky drugs or gambling or entrepreneurship, which is also incredibly risky and a lot of people avoid doing. Most of these people that do those sorts of things are very high in extroversion. And generally, as far as the United States goes, being extroverted works better in your favor as far as career success versus being introverted. Going back to the whole old dictum of it's not what you know, but who you know. And the people who know the most people are the extroverts. As far as extroverts are more likely to go out and meet a lot of people, and because of this are also also better and more experienced at making connections with a lot of people. And essentially, the more the bigger pool of people that you have, the more opportunities you have available to you.
So true. I'm totally like experiencing that currently at the market. So true.
So the fourth category would be is agreeableness. And this one is separated out into, I'm trying to remember. There's so much information to remember between all of these things.
I want to say something about
Agreeableness is,
agreeableness while you gather your thoughts on it. I want to say that agreeableness is very important to figure out and master because especially in today's day where we live in a world where we have every tool possible to optimize our time and time usage. However, the one thing to make all that crash down could be you being too agreeable and saying yes to too many tasks.
mm, um, so yeah, agreeableness would be splits off into politeness and compassion. So those
Like both or
two,
none or one or the other.
one or the other, although for most cases, usually if you're high in agreeableness, you're high in both. So agreeableness to the way I like to put it is kind of like oxytocin, where it's a bit of a double-edged sword. And some people watching this may be thinking, how is oxytocin a double-edged sword? How could oxytocin be bad? So
Or some
oxytocin is
people
normally
might also be asking, which you're about to answer. I just heard you about to answer it. What is oxytocin?
so oxytocin is a hormone that is generated in the brain. Is normally known as the love hormone because it's generated from what we would consider acts of love, from hugging, cuddling, and making social connections. For women specifically, they get a lot of it after having a child, which
Okay.
is incredibly important because they need a lot of it to put up with a baby that wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning, many times crying, so that you love and protect the thing anymore and throw it out the window. So that's the more positive and important aspect of oxytocin. The unfortunate part of oxytocin is that it also increases your hostility against people who are not like you. So oxytocin makes you a bit tribalistic. And segueing that back into agreeableness, there's a there's a double-edged sword there with something that is generally considered to be good, because being high in agreeableness typically means that you're easy to get along with. It's fairly easy for you to make friends and relationships with people. But being very high in agreeableness also means you're more likely to be a doormat, that people will generally take advantage of you, that you generally will not negotiate for yourself very well. So generally, people who are higher in agreeableness usually end up with lower wages than people who are not, specifically because these people generally don't ask for wage increase, don't really negotiate for wages at like a job interview, and will generally go out their way to do extra work without looking for compensation for it. And these are generally the type of people that would do volunteer work as well, because unlike the more disagreeable people, they're not trying to do everything they can to get resources from themselves, but are rather concerned about everyone getting resources. So typically, women are usually higher in agreeableness than men are. This is actually one of the biggest factors as far as differences between men and women that can be quantified. And as far as agreeableness goes, it is better to have a bit of a balance on it rather than being in one extreme or another. Too high, and you're pretty much a magnet for the most malignant of people who are looking to take advantage of you the best that they can. Too low, and you're likely to be one of those people that like to take advantage of others to the best that they can. One ends up being someone's servant, and one ends up on a one-way track to prison. So neither extreme is good. It, you kind of want to get a good sense of how much agreeableness you have. And in a lot of cases, you may want to rein that in or work on becoming more agreeable. So that one, having a good balance is especially important for yourself and the people around you. So neuroticism. That's going to be the last category we cover for the big five.
Okay.
Neuroticism is essentially how you respond to negative stimulus and how differing levels of negative stimulus affect you. In a nutshell, the higher in neuroticism you are, the more likely you are to have a negative response to negative stimulus.
Okay.
Um, Easier way to think about it is thinking of like if you usually find someone high in neuroticism, you will consider them being neurotic. So there's two different dimensions that was split from neuroticism. One is withdrawal and one is volatility. Withdrawal, so people who are high in withdrawal within neuroticism, these people would seclude themselves when they're in a neurotic episode. So they'll kind of just get away from whatever is causing them stress and just kind of just isolate themselves away from everything.
Hmm.
Whereas someone who is volatile, when they become stressed, they'll become very aggressive. And so a way to think about this is like if you're in a heated argument with someone who's high withdrawal, they'll just leave and give you the silent treatment. versus someone who's volatile is they'll start screaming at you.
Yeah, I'm more the prior than the latter. I would definitely say that. I would just not give you the time anymore and I'll just peace out. I don't want to spend the energy on converting your argument.
Right.
Okay,
Um,
interesting.
some conflicting thing you'll see is that typically see some people who are volatile will try to use the withdrawal method up to their breaking point until the volatility comes out. So you'll see this in the case of going back to the argument is where, you're bringing up an argument with them and they give you the silent treatment until you just keep pressing it and pressing it and pressing it to the point where they then turn around and scream at you. So you can see that play out as well. So it's not necessarily the case that they're both, it's just you have someone who is volatile that's trying not to be volatile.
Mm. Hmm.
Okay, so that's the big five. A lot easier to explain and get through than the Myers Briggs.
Well, also we got to skip the extroversion part because it's in both, I think.
Right, right. But even then, like extroversion is pretty easy to understand. Like pretty much most people know the concept of extroversion and introversion without necessarily having to have a background and or even passing knowledge of psychology.
Mm.
Um, okay, so those are two differing models for understanding personality. My personal recommendation is Myers Briggs would be better for specifically a general understanding of you as a person as far as your actions, as far as like your general actions and what is generally expected of you, especially as you age over time. And your Myers Briggs type indicator will stay the same throughout your entire lifetime. The Big Five, however, is more of so going back to that coloring book example, the Myers Briggs would be your outline, and the Big Five would be the colors that fill in that outline.
Mm.
And the thing about the Big Five is that you're
Sounds more
scaling among
robust.
each. Yeah, your scaling among the Big Five will change over time, and
Okay.
you do have you can have your own personal influence on how those change over time with work and effort, and your external environment will also have influence over that as well as you age over time.
Okay.
So with both of those combined, then you have the completed picture.
That's really cool, and I just want to say this, especially because it's on my side of the outline. Um, I just want to imagine that, let's say I'm a guru or like a Buddhist, like higher up or something that didn't know this stuff exists. I would just be like, "What is knowing without knowing?" That would be my answer to this whole episode. I would just be like, um, am I trying to find something or am I trying to find whatever I find?
Yeah, my response to that would probably be the general response, which is what?
Well, and from both perspectives, that's the answer is what? But I do find that like an acceptance of your own logic is very important. So, to someone who is logical in the way of, um, I want to understand the Myers Briggs and the big ocean and kind of put a mechanical process to understanding myself. That's important to you. Not you specifically, James, but to that person. And then to someone else who just naturally knows themselves, either their ego or their spirit. Um, Good for them as well. It's it's either or, and I think my my best way to explain this is this one phrase can be utilized across every aspect of not just life but knowledge, is that the more you know, the more you know that you don't know. It's not that you don't know anything, it's that you now know that there's more things to know. So like as
I've s-
go on.
I, I've seen. I'm trying to remember where I saw it. I think I've seen that in. It was like some old book. It was kind of like a think of a thing, like a list of different euphemisms, and one of them was like the difference between the intelligent and the unintelligent. And if I remember correctly, the one under intelligent was intelligent people have the understanding that they know very little, and unintelligent people have the understanding that they, or at least have the perception that they know a lot.
Yes. And so I've been thinking a lot about the 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 kind of um role I have not just in this entire podcast, but also in this particular aspect. And I know that we kind of talk about it as a Buddhist perspective, but I really highly want to deny that. I wouldn't say it's a Buddhist perspective. I wouldn't even say it's a Christian perspective, but I want to say it's like a free spirit or spiritual perspective where it's like I'm not Mr. Science, I'm Mr. Art, and I want to understand and then reiterate what you're saying, and I feel like you're in this case Mr. Science, and you bring to me these ideas which I find are very insightful and helpful. Uh
Hmm.
Actually very helpful because they're giving me more understanding. And as I just said, the more I understand about this, the more I understand that I don't understand. Um, but as a free spirit, I go like, okay, these are all great, but it's similar to reading like uh for being general and uh um not like categorizing, but imagine reading like a become the alpha male kind of book, okay? Um, so let's say you're a nerd who's not an quotation marks alpha male, but you're very intellectual and you grab this book and you learn it and then you practice it and you become this alpha male. So there's that type of understanding of behavior and practicing and becoming it. But then there's the quotation marks alpha male who doesn't even who acts in the way the book describes, but they don't even know that this book exists. So relating it to this topic, I know who I am. I'm Joe. Nice to meet you all. I'm a Pokemon professor. I'm maybe a little witty and snappy and bubbly. Uh, you know, no real terminology to my personality. However, there's people who could go and say Meyers Briggs and Joe, you're in, I forget what one the 16personalities.com gave me, whatever, you're an advocate, as they describe it. And I would say, sure, okay, I'm in that category. Now what? I keep living because I'm a conscious person living, and I know that I love art, and I'm gonna make art. And with the new knowledge that I have, that I've been growing and actually putting more conscious thought into, which is specifically, I think, agreeableness. I know that I'm a little too agreeable and I need to work on this, or I could be a detriment to myself and those around me. So, as a spirit who's wanting to always be beneficial, not just to the people around me, but to myself, because I can't be beneficial to those around me without me taking care of myself first, I should work on this aspect of my personality.
Well, see, the thing about these two tools combined is that depending on where you are in life, you can use them for many different purposes. So the purpose we're setting forth here is okay, so you're an artist, but say you're a younger person. You don't know what to do in your life. Say you're in high school, you're in the career center, and you've been fed all this information that you need to figure out what school, what university you want to apply to and get scholarships. And big part of picking which university you want to go to is what degree do you want to get and what would be the best school to fit that specific degree. Branching off, well, furthering that, whatever degree that you decide to go for is going to be based on what kind of career you want to have. And that's the big question. What kind of career do you want to have? That's a big question, especially for a teenager who, for their entire life, has been living in their parents' house. They haven't been outside doing different jobs and going, I like doing this and I
May
don't
I
like
just
doing
add,
this.
living in their parents' house, and also, and I'm gonna, I'm just gonna deny any other um, logic behind this because I think we all go through this, but living in our parents' house, but also trying to fill other people's expectations, including fitting in with our peers and also doing what it is that mom and dad want you to do, which is become a doctor so that you get a mansion and a pretty wife so they could be grandparents. So, like, you're already, from birth, you're already given expectations on what your career is. And it may not be you, and you will have convinced yourself, and others around you will have convinced you that you are who you are not.
Well, yeah, and so just based off of that scenario right there, we can already make a determination that that person is highly agreeable because the person in low in agreeableness will say, I don't care what you want me to do. I want to do what I want to do, and I'm going to do what I want to do.
That's so conflicting right there. And okay, I don't want this to turn into an argument. And if it does turn into an argument, I want the audience to know that this is a friendly argument, okay? But
Mm.
I'm known to be high in agreeableness, but I'm doing exactly the opposite of what you just said, where uh, I'm not agreeable because my parents wanted me in with a business degree. Instead, I have a graphic design non-business life. So even though I'm high in agreeableness and do like almost everything that's asked of me by several people, for some reason I'm high in disagreeableness because I don't have that business degree that my parents wanted me to have. Also regretting not having that business degree because as an artist, a business degree would be very useful to me. I mean, for building my entrepreneurship and my business.
Well, you have your limit. Everyone's
Yes.
going to have their threshold where they're just like, I'm putting my foot down.
Okay, but so where do you see this? Like, my do you see what I'm saying? Like, my decision to continue being an artist is me being disagreeable, even though I'm super agreeable and handing out logo designs.
Yeah, that's just being on the spectrum.
Oh,
There's no okay, so there's no black and white of you're agreeable, so you're just gonna do whatever people tell you, and
no,
you're
I demand
disagreeable,
a
so you're just gonna
Boolean.
do whatever you want.
I
But
demand a
rather,
Boolean statement. I
it
or
is
O. No, okay, sorry.
yeah, it's not a black and white, but rather it's a giant scale.
Perfect.
You can have a whole group of agreeable people that have differing levels of agreeableness, and they can have their own clique together where the least agreeable person out of that group of very agreeable people will just assume command of that group and tell the others what to do.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is profound. This is crazy. Like, because I'm so, like, just go with the flow, and I keep seeing myself in dangerous positions. But, like, I just right now feel like you're making this podcast about me for me, and it's so wrong. I know it's not like that, but I literally, like, right now I'm just like, wow, like, I'm placing myself in these either past situations or future situations and kind of trying to calculate how I fit within these two different personality things. And it's very confusing to me because I'm just like, no, I'm a soul in a body, and I'm just living, which is
Well,
how I want to interpret it, right? That's my ideal, is that I'm just living and I'm happy to be living and I want those around me to be happy.
well, the purpose of it is not necessarily to get completely caught up in the details, but rather understanding this material so you can kind of get an understanding where you fit into these models. So then you can use these models and figure out what exactly you want to do using this information. And maybe in one case is you don't know what career you want to do in life. And so you use these models. So like for example, like say you have someone and they look at this and are just like, okay, I'm a little bit I'm pretty creative. I'm a little bit open. I can do some new things. I can handle change, and you know, I'm hardworking. I like people. I like hanging out with people. More people the better. And I'm pretty agreeable, and I can handle some stress. Maybe I should go into nursing. That fits that model, that specific model for that person very well. Or hey, maybe not even nursing. Maybe shoot, they want to be a doctor. Or maybe they want to go into hospitality, maybe they want to be a travel agent, maybe they want to run a hotel, just somewhere where they can handle a lot of different people coming at them. They get to interact with a lot of people, they get to make like good relationships with a whole bunch of people and have like that good bedside manner or that good hospitality or whatnot. There's like a whole bunch of different career choices available to that specific um, personality model that person fits into versus having that same person with those specific characteristics going, I'm going to basically go lock myself in a lab and work by myself for 20 years and slowly go insane and miserable because this just does not fit me whatsoever.
Hmm.
But say I'm doing it because my parents wanted me to become a famous researcher. That's the kind of thing we're trying to avoid there. Whereas we're using this to figure out what you want to do that will not only be meaningful for you to do, but also you would actually like to do.
Hmm.
And understanding yourself is a very important key aspect of figuring that out. And maybe you're an older viewer, maybe you're 30 or 40 or 50 or something. You're already in your career. You already had that figured out. And so you don't need it specifically to figure out what you want to do as far as a career. That's great. Maybe you're in a situation where maybe you get into maybe you get in arguments with your spouse and you don't understand why. And now you can use these tools to kind of like figure out where the difference lies, and you can make the adjustments necessary so your relationship can become better. Maybe you're in a situation where, say, you're a teacher and you're dealing with kind of a difficult student that you don't really understand that well because you never really interacted with this type of person before. And you can use this model to better understand that type of person and have a specific interaction that that person would be more receptive towards. There's many different ways you can use these models. It's just a matter of, in this case, being a higher openness to experience where you are open to the idea of taking in a new tool that you can utilize and having the creativity to properly apply it for whatever you need it for.
That's so exciting that you said that right now. Okay, uh let me interject here. So that's what I was saying um earlier. So with the two examples of a nerd who wants to become the alpha male and uses the tools of the book to get there, or the alpha male who doesn't know that the book even exists. Now imagine if the alpha male was open to realizing that there's this book, and he can now define his traits even not knowing that they exist. When that person reads the book, they'll go, um, agreeableness. Oh, yeah, I do that all the time. I just didn't know what it was called. And you start to kind of put pieces together and build a picture, and you grow an understanding, even though you were already in that behavior. You now
Mm,
understand the behavior.
right. Like that's pretty much what the entire field of psychology is for. Like every human goes and does their own specific thing, but the field of psychology is specifically for the purpose of understanding what exactly are they doing and why. Because doing things, existing is easy. Knowing why we do things is pretty difficult.
Mm.
This is the whole reason why we have psychologists in the first place and why people go to therapy and whatnot, because it's not exactly obvious on why we do certain things. And so these type of tools are created and distributed in order to get a better understanding of this so it can actually use to make your life better,
Interesting. That's so crazy. All right. Um,
right?
I've just actually, and I know this is kind of out of order, but I just had a thought about where is it? I had a thought about our Meyers Briggs conversation about introverts and extroverts. Um,
Mm,
and my thought is, so um, I have a soulmate. Okay, I'm currently not in like committed relationship with the soulmate. Now, so let's say through when I was in this committed relationship, yeah, we are still friends. But when I was in this committed relationship, more so than now, um, I would go through like a busy weekend where I'm full of people draining my energy as an extrovert, or sorry, as an introvert. Um, but I feel like so my energy's now been drained, but I feel like in connecting to this one person, I can gain energy even though it involves an extroversion of sorts. And again, sorry for jumping backwards here, but I just had this thought, and this whole episode has been kind of like profound to me, maybe because of um my state of mind prior and going into today's episode, but also just like overall, like I'm learning and considering lots of new thoughts. So that's why I guess I wanted to jump back to this thought. But yeah, I've had situations where this person just basically revived me.
Um, I guess addressing that specifically, I'm going to avoid the soulmate thing. But as far as getting kind of like more energy and revitalize with a one-on-one interaction, that's pretty normal for an introvert. Introverts do thrive in very small scale interactions, but the larger scale that it becomes, then they start losing a lot of energy. Whereas extrovert, they would like the one-on-one interaction, but the more people, the better.
Hmm. Do you think that the extrovert would get bored of the one-on-one and look to like continue to grow that pack, I guess?
Depends on how extroverted they are, but
Okay.
typically, the more extroverted they are, the more people they want involved.
Okay, cool.
Um, I guess one trend you'll see over a large amount of different extroverts is that, well, I guess a lot extroverts and introverts is that introverts usually have stronger, more close knit relationships with a few people, while extroverts have more sparse and general relationships with a lot of people.
Hmm.
So it's the difference between depth and abundance.
So now here's another question on this. I don't know why this is the most intriguing category of the entire episode to me is this introversion versus extroversion. Um so something I'm finding, so and I would say that I categorize myself as more of an introverted person as I'm required to be uh more outgoing and part of a larger community. Hello, Bountiful Farmers Market. I love you all, and I hope you don't take this personally in a bad way. But I'm finding that I'm I'm having a hard time with like remembering names and keeping things to more of a personal level with each individual. Um, do you find that's part of introversion extroversion, or is it another part of um this whole topic that we're talking about? Or do you find that because I'm introverted, I make it harder for, or it is harder for me to remember and continue to like uh grow these relationships with so many different people, and I feel bad about it. Like I really want to know, I want to be able to remember everyone in this community's name, their story, because again, I would say I'm agreeable and that I want all these people to be happy, not just with me, but also the things that I do or uh act the way I act or whatever. But I find that it feels impossible. Like I just met some
Um,
people, I already forgot their name. Is that because I'm introverted?
mm-mm. So I guess staying within the realms of these personality models, I'm gonna go switch this back to the Myers Briggs. Um, this one would be specifically under the category of the cognitive function introverted sensing.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
introverted sensing is a cognitive function that heavily deals with details, the past, and having essentially a strong collection of memories of specific details and specific maybe even emotions and whatnot that are tied to those details. So people who have introverted sensing high in their cognitive stack, so either like first or second, generally have a very strong memory and are very past oriented. And so you find one of those people, they will easily remember your name and all the little details that you gave to them, even down to they'll remember what day that you met them, around how many people were there, what clothes you were wearing, what song was playing during the time there was a song playing, where the sun was, and all of that. Just all these random little details that you wouldn't even think of. They just have it remembered. I know personally my mother is like this. Like, I guess under Myers Briggs, she would categorize as a ISTJ. And for ISTJ, introverted sensing is their primary function. So it will be first on the stack. And her memory among my family is terrifying.
Hmm.
Like to the point where a lot of my family makes a lot of jokes where she should be in the CIA.
Wow. So that would put me
And
more like an IN versus an IS.
yeah, intuitives, um, well, especially like a INFJ, like your introverted sensing would be like just so far down there that you might as well just like forget about it.
But there's ways to, like, I like to think, and I definitely have worked on it and improved. I like to think I can work on remembering people's names.
Yeah, you definitely can. It's just not going to come naturally.
Okay. Oh yeah,
But
okay.
you definitely can come up with a lot of different methods of not even just specifically remembering names, but just remembering specific details about anything in general. Um, you'll find that, for example, a lot of intuitives, because medicine is definitely a profession that a lot of intuitives like to go into. Medicine requires ridiculous amounts of memorization, and memorization does not come naturally for any intuitives because it's either like third or fourth in their stack, which means they get access to it at a much later time in their life, so well beyond the age where you would typically go to medical school. Or it's so down far in your stack that you just won't have natural access to it like within your lifetime if we're still in the case where we die around like before around 100 years of age. So there are several different techniques of memorizing that they have to rely upon, and one of the most famous ones is the memory palace.
Interesting.
Where And the memory palace is the sort of thing where, as I was saying before, what the introverted sensings naturally do with connecting memories to other certain things like emotions or whatnot, the memory palace is basically taking things that you already know and sort of meshing them with new information that you're trying to learn. So, like, for example, if you're trying to remember all the bones in your head, you might have like a specific story where the first letter of each word in that short story is the same first letter of each bone in your hand.
Mm.
It's a little inconvenient, but you do what works and you do what you have to do in order to, pass medical school.
Yeah, yeah, and you kind of learn these tricks and tools as you go. I think for me, like, since I'm trying to put some sort of importance on remembering people's names, the trick for me that's worked for this is just making sure that I I ask for their name early in the conversation, and then I try my darn hardest to make sure that their name is the last thing I say before I end the conversation. I don't
Yeah.
know why it works, but it has been working. But I'm still like forgetting a a few names here and there, but it's worked a lot better than just trying to remember the names.
Yeah, like another trick that you can use is like say we're meeting each other for this first time. It's just like, "Hi, I'm James. What's your name?" You're like, "I'm Joe." It's like, "Hi, Joe. Nice to meet you. So, Joe, what do you think about the weather?" Blah 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 blah. By the way, Joe, blah blah blah
Oh,
blah blah
like
blah blah.
say their
Oh,
name
Joe, did
as
you
many
hear?
times.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're just
okay.
using it several times throughout the conversation. So by the time you finally used it, you said their name so many times that it will be hard for you to forget it.
I like that technique for myself. However, I feel like the other person would get heckin' annoyed.
If you use it sparingly throughout the conversation, they won't even notice. And realistically, people actually respond positively if you use their name because they're so conditioned to kind of just like wake up and be alert when they hear their name called.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So long as, you're not using it every other sentence, because then at that point they think something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
If you
Well,
just
there is something wrong with me, and that something wrong is I suck at remembering names. Okay. Okay. Okay.
I
Okay.
mean,
Calm
like
down,
like
me.
people not remembering names. That's a very common thing. Like especially if you work in my field of work, where it's just like basically just filled to the brim with intuitives, because like it's just a science field. They are horrible at remembering names. Heck, a lot of the times when I'm like trying to discuss some kind of concept out of chemistry or like some engineering concept, I don't even remember the name of the concept I'm discussing, but I remember all of the details of the concept itself. Like, uh, let's see, we need to like figure out how to create turbulence within this specific flow state. Here's the equation for that. Oh, what is that equation called? I don't remember, but it doesn't matter because I remember the equation.
Hmm.
What may come into an issue later is if I end up forgetting the equation and then I don't remember the name to look it up.
Yeah. So then you can reinforce it in your mind. Okay.
All right.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. Again, sorry for going off topic and jumping all the way back to the beginning of the topic to kind of explore these thoughts I'm having. So I appreciate you bearing with me on that. I believe we've we've gotten an understanding for this Big Five and
Mm.
the Meyers Briggs. Um, so now that we've got an understanding for this, and hopefully you as viewers, whether you decide to take some actions or not, hopefully we've figured out a little more about ourselves. Now, how can we use this information about ourselves to go on to choosing a goal, whether it's a career or just uh, preparing meals for ourselves for the next month consecutively? Uh, yeah, how can we go on and deciding how we want to improve and set the goal for our improving.
So when you utilize these personality models, what you're going to get is your primary strengths and weaknesses. And so out of that information, you'll come to the realization that for, let's say, going back to careers, because like as far as this podcast goes, we're looking for improvement, and one improvement is maybe you're already in an established career, but you hate your job. Like a lot of people hate their job. They went into something that they thought would be good for them, or maybe they thought would make them a lot of money, or maybe they thought they were like, and that wasn't the case. So now at this point, you have more of an idea of who you are, what your interests would sort of lie in, what your strengths and weaknesses are. And now you can look at specific jobs that would tailor to those sorts of interests and strengths and avoid the jobs that fall under your weaknesses and where your interests don't lie. And so you can start looking at getting the sort of education and training you need to get into that particular job. So you can go into that job, you find it a lot more fulfilling than whatever you're doing now, or maybe you're just young and you just haven't been in the workforce at all, and so you can get into a job where you're fulfilling and not have to waste a whole bunch of time doing all this education and training for a line of work that you don't like. um to think, what is this, I think it's a Bruce Lee quote, I might be wrong, but no, actually, no, I don't think it's Bruce Lee. I don't remember who the quote is from. There was a
If it
quote I
has to do
remember
with water,
where,
it's Bruce Lee.
no, it doesn't have to
Okay,
do with the
okay.
water thing.
Okay.
Um,
We
but
must be like the
the
water. Okay, go on.
um, which I might talk about that later because I do want to talk a little bit about that as far as Buddhism go, but that'll be like way down the road. But basically, the quote was somewhere along the lines of a fool a fool works for money. What I want to do is get paid to play. And when you do something that you're highly interested in and that you get a lot of excitement in doing as a job, you're not working for pay, you're getting paid to play. And that's ideally where you want to be.
I hope you're listening, Dad.
Oh my goodness.
No, seriously, because it's something that it took me so long to understand until these past couple years. Um, I grew up admiring my dad, and my dad spent a lot of time at work, quotation marks, bunny ears, I guess. But he would always say that. Always. He'd say that in a variety of different ways, but he'd say that a lot of people are waiting for Friday. I'm
Yeah.
just living and enjoying what I'm doing. That's basically how he'd say, but he'd say it more like this, like he'd say it's not work if you're having fun.
Yeah.
That's in essence what he was trying to say. And I would always be like, "Dad, no one wants to be standing here at a gas station taking money." But now I understand, like to him, it wasn't standing at a gas station selling gas. It was building something and expanding on it and growing it and refining it. And he loved doing that. He loves doing that. Even though he's not in that industry right now, um, that's his personality. he loves building and growing and refining. It's almost like a game. So in that case, I'm in that situation right now. I'm working on my website. I recently spent a whole week, of course, balancing what I'm doing for my clients and myself, converting all my titles on my website from being bold text to text that is graphically created and converted to an image so it looks prettier. And people would look at me. I mean, like I talk to my family all day, or not all day, every day, and they go, "Yo, you've been working for like 28 hours straight," and I'd be like, "No, I was just improving my website, and it was fun. It wasn't work at all."
Yeah. Like, I guess just imagine how it'd be if you're at your job and, you're doing your thing, and then next thing you know, you look at the clock and you're just like, wait, what? It's time to go already?
I don't have to imagine it. Well, okay, I would have to imagine the "it's time to go already" part because I don't go anywhere to do work. Oh, well, no. Okay, at the market, even today, I was like, "Oh, it's like 5 minutes to 5. I have to pack up and get ready to go." Like I was like, "Holy!" So yeah, in that case, yeah. But like for design stuff, it's more like, and I every single day, uh, I'll miss lunch by like an hour, and it will take me feeling hungry to look at the time.
Mm.
And then I'll look at the time and be like, "Oh, yeah, I've been having fun." And it's only been like I said, this past couple years where it's like, yeah, yeah, the art is awesome, but I'm also growing and learning to appreciate the building of my business.
Yeah, I definitely shoot, I had that this last week where I was working with this one lady, and we're just running around like trying to figure all this stuff out, and then it was just like, all right, well, we got all that done. It's like, you want to eat lunch? And it's like, yeah, it's 4:30. We might as well just like get ready to go. It's just like, what?
Okay, so now, I know I might be a bit chatty, especially when it comes to talking about stuff like this, but I also have this experience, and again, I don't want to be a good or bad influence on anyone's life. All I want is to share my experience so that you can use it however it benefits you. Not just you, James, like everyone who ends up watching or hearing this. Um, so prior to the past 2 years, I was still in the art and design field, but I hated my job. Okay, so I really want everyone to not just decide because of one bad experience that this isn't for you. I want you to analyze what it is about the experience that isn't you and make your decision based on
Mm,
that. So for me, it was like, I don't like that my employer makes me do something that is potentially illegal. Does that mean I don't like being a designer and making art? No, I don't like that scenario, and I'm going to remove myself from that scenario specifically. And I'm going to keep doing art, except I'm going to make the decision to build my own business and build something that will benefit people and not, be in what feels like the wrong. Because again, um, whether it was or wasn't illegal, I wouldn't know. I'm not a lawyer. I haven't studied the law. It just felt wrong. So it's just an internal thing. So what I'm trying to share this experience with is, maybe you didn't make the wrong career choice. Maybe it's the job itself. So analyze
and possibly.
this. And I
Yeah.
really want to identify this because actually a good friend of mine who I haven't spoke to in a long time said this, and he's a very industrious, just a hardworking person who isn't really building his own business. But he said this. He said, if I ever go to hire someone, or when I was looking for a job, the reason I got my job is because I told the prospective employer that I'm looking for a career, not a job. So a career is very different than a job.
Oh yeah.
A job is you working for a person or like doing a thing. A career is it's a it's a definition of what you do generally. Maybe you can put it into words better than me. And it looks like I'm unstable
I don't
connection
know.
again.
Yeah, I would typically classify a job as a task that you're doing because no one wants to do, that you're getting paid for, whereas a career is essentially your livelihood. Oh, he's gone.
Oh, I'm here. You could probably hear me, but the stream is definitely butchered.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm here now.
That's okay. The stream came back. Um, so yeah, it's definitely much preferable to have a career than a job.
Hmm. And when you do that, it turns out that, oh, you don't like this job, but you still have your career, which is a definition or a profession that you have. You can go, hey, I'm a senior graphic designer. Anyone hiring?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So let's see. Ooh, this next part we might have to put into another podcast.
Um,
Because this could probably take another hour. We're already at about the 3 hour mark.
mhm. Which is it makes me confident in the decision we made to do this after the market instead of during. So I'm glad about that, and I would say I'm open to covering this. It's up to you. If you want to, let's dive in and try to keep it short. But if you don't think that's possible, we can just do it next episode. It's fine.
I do not think it's possible.
Okay.
I, I honestly think every single key point in here could probably, keeping it as short as possible, probably cover 20 to 30 minutes each.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, and mainly because it's starting to get close to midnight.
Oh yeah, yeah, I forgot. We're in different time zones.
Hmm.
You don't sound that tired.
I am pretty tired, mainly because um, nowadays I'm usually working from 6 a.m., so I usually get up at 4 a.m.
Hmm.
And so typically I would be asleep probably like 3 hours earlier from now.
Oh, okay. Wow. So, I guess
So,
let's do it. I'm pushing you through. Let's go.
so I think probably it would be best to split this into a two-parter. So I think from this point we'll do a kind of bit of a recap. So I think we cover a lot of ground here. We covered two different personality models that you can use. You can kind of, anyone viewing this, you can pretty much go and dive a little bit further into each if you want to get a little bit more information out of it. Get a better understanding of it, because we kind of went over a general description of what it is and how it works, but you can dive much deeper and get into much more specifics than what was covered in this podcast, and work to get the most that you can out of those two different personality models. Again, I would definitely advise against using it for anything other than a positive experience or a positive choice. But these two can be especially useful for kind of like many different purposes, some that we cover here, but you can pretty much use any sort of example where especially you have to deal with something that kind of has to deal with an expression of yourself or an interaction with someone else in order to improve the experience.
Hmm.
So you have any closing words, Joe?
Yeah, yeah, I totally do. Um, and it's as I've been saying, and as I said I would to you. But I'm gonna say this to the audience: just live. Just live. Yes, these are tools, but the tool doesn't make the man. The man makes the tool. You use the tool and make your life better, but in the end, live. And that's saying it in the least possible way that would make me seem like a spiritual uh goof ball, because I am that. I am a spiritual goofball, but I literally just want to say that. And I want to say it over and over again. Be alive. Appreciate that you're alive and use whatever tools you're provided. I don't mean through us. Yes, we're providing with some tools, but friends and family also provide you with tools. But they also provide you with emotions. And emotions are good. They are literally the foundation of what makes you human, because fear is an example, but fear is an emotion that kept us alive for millions of years. However, whenever the first human came about, fear told that primitive form of what we are today to GTFO and not encounter this giant beast. All right? So you have these emotions, and whether they're part of your personality traits or just part of you being human, um, experience it. So, yeah, live. That's my final words. Live. Wait, that's one word. That's my final word.
All right. So I think it'll be good to close it out there. I want to thank everyone for watching this podcast and stay tuned for some more.